Welcome to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. I'm here today with Anton, who is the founder of House of Transformation and Selgars Estate. And Anton, we met at Rebuild, I think 2 years ago in Portugal.
Yeah.
It's great to be on this episode with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear, just for a bit of context setting, your involvement at Rebuild, what you're doing at Selgars Estate right now, and maybe even, make it three. What's House of Transformation? Because I know that's been a very powerful spot for people in the UK.
Yeah, so it all started with the pandemic, really, like a lot of stories these days, where I found myself with a lot of time in my hands, and kind of all my consulting projects froze, and we were kind of in this limbo. And a few things emerged. I was invited by a friend, Nico, to speak about villages, and I hadn't kind of thought about villages for a while, because I'd kind of gone down another path. I'd kind of put those ideas to one side, and then I got an opportunity to give a little masterclass talk. So I kind of put a presentation together, and then I was reminded of how much I liked this kind of, and how much I cared about this dream and this inquiry into how we live and how we can transform spaces and land and build community. And that then inspired me to kind of reconnect with an old friend called Victor, bring Nico along. We also connected with Sam, who was doing OASA, and he brought Annie on board with TDF. And we set up a little working group saying we need to do some kind of event about villages right now, because everyone's at home on their screens. We're kind of realizing how disconnected we are from nature and from each other, and there's something here. This is the right time to do something like this. So we went around in circles, coming up with names and ideas for what to call this kind of group, and around village building, whatever that meant, this kind of new age of village building. And then the name Rebuild came. And then in 2021, we held an online gathering and had about 500-600 people join. And that kind of kickstarted, and we were very surprised because we just kind of invited people to give sessions presenting their projects and ideas. And that created a momentum to then host a physical gathering in Portugal. And then I kind of took on the baton and did one in Netherlands. There was one in Costa Rica. And in many ways, Rebuild formed the kernel for Enchanted, which is the event that I was planning for the UK. And this was actually what made Selgars possible. So we were looking for a venue to create a UK-based regeneration festival and gathering similar to Rebuild. And we found this beautiful place in Devon, signed up as an event partner to do several retreats as well as the festival. And then it was about end of November that I got a call from the people running the venue saying they were closing. And then I was kind of first a bit in shock, going, oh dear, we have to cancel. There aren't really other good venues that we could do this in. Oh, it's a shame. And then I thought, well, what if we could take over the lease? I've been running House of Transformation. This is a dream of ours. Why not? And so I met with the owner. I put together a website saying this is how we're going to be promoting and running the venue. And we agreed a 2-year lease with an option to buy at a really good value. And we moved in on the 29th of December, had a little New Year's party and gathering and retreat for a few days, and then opened to co-living. And so This Selgars Estate is an 8-acre estate that's in beautiful secluded grounds, but really well connected to road infrastructure and rail infrastructure. So only 2 hours direct train from London Paddington, and then you can either walk 30 minutes or you can cycle 10 minutes. And it's very accessible, and but you're surrounded by water. It's an old converted 18th century mill house, and it had so much potential. And not just great accommodation and great facilities, but also the potential to expand and grow. And so that was Selgars, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that project and our vision to turn this into a village over the next few years. and also the Enchanted Village gathering, which will be a really important part of that collective community
Coming
journey.
up this summer, right?
Yeah,
July
yeah,
6 to 9.
exactly. And then just to finish off, House of Transformation was the first step in this journey, because what I realized in a lot of my consulting work and research was that what people were really missing in cities and also out of cities is really affordable, beautiful, nature-inspired meeting and event space. There's lots of offices, lots of apartments, but actually lots of cafes and bars and hotels, but very few places which felt like home or felt like an
Mm-hmm.
extension of your home that you could book on demand at a
Yeah.
relatively affordable price. And you can host your 30-person, 50-person in a party or dinner where you can gather as a company for your training or for your board meeting or for your team away days. And you could have a space with a kitchen, with a really beautiful kind of nature-inspired venue, 3-meter wide projector screen, double height ceilings, lots of light, lots of plants, and lots of places to kind of break out into. And it wasn't a co-working space where you were constantly had people you didn't know around. This was, you could lock the door. This was your own private venue for the day, for the afternoon, to do that really, really important meeting or social event. And so saw that there was a gap in the market. And then when the pandemic hit, the office above where we lived, above our apartment, was available to rent. And so I negotiated a good rent-free period, and then we transformed that space because it was really just horrible. It had fluorescent kind of car park style lighting, horrible cheap plastic furniture, and it was such a kind of diamond in the rough. And so we agreed a lease, and yeah, we've been running the venue, and now it's almost a self-run venue, just like Airbnb. People get a lockbox and key, and then they use the space, and yeah, the kind of a really important principle is treat the space as if it was an extension of your home. So people kind of look after it, they don't trash it, and this on-demand model is fantastic because actually we can keep the price affordable but still make a good profit. And there's always going to be gaps in the calendar, where we can gift the space to friends, or we can offer discounts to charities, or run our own community gatherings and dinners. And so this kind of approach to how you optimize and utilize space is really important. It's not just about one tenant, one use. It's about how
Totally.
can we really make a space work for
And
all times of day, all times of year.
yeah, and that's really like it's the tagline and the purpose also on House of Transformation website. But I think it is a through line, or like a golden line, or whatever you want to call it, that connects all three of those projects, right? It's like reimagining space and enhancing like well-being, art, circular economy, and really change that comes from the people that are in those spaces, rather than just new business models in that sense. Like, how do you when you think of reimagining space, um you already mentioned it has to feel like home. What else is kind of like a
Yeah.
feeling signature to the way
Yeah.
you see rebuilding, reimagining, and
Yeah.
the future of spaces?
Well, I think the first way to answer that is a very practical answer, which is the worst thing is a space that is empty and unutilized.
Mm.
So the fact that an office space is empty for at least 50% of the time, because people then leave for the evenings, and or they leave, and then the weekends it's sitting empty. Such a waste. And so how can you make an aesthetic? How can you make an interior design that works for social and professional context?
Mm.
And then there are certain things that do work. Biophilic design, lots of natural wood, lots of plants, but also smart lights, because you need bright lights in the day for work, but then you don't want to sit in bright white light when you're having a dinner or when you're trying to create an atmosphere. So, and actually it's not so expensive to buy smart lights, and there's a bunch of apps that you can use to control them, and then bingo, suddenly you have a space that can adapt. So the lighting is critical. And then I think we were lucky that our space had already a fitted kitchen, so we just built out a really big kitchen island with bar stools, and suddenly that creates a slightly different atmosphere, right? But it's actually really handy for for a work context as well, to have somewhere to put snacks, food, drink, so forth. And then the other little touch that we added for House of Transformation was a stage. And it basically was where the projector was, the screen that could come down, but also it created that sense of theatre. There aren't too many boardroom meetings that have stages, and it gave us quite a lot of storage as well underneath, which was handy. And then I think that the other aspect of it was I love to paint. I almost went to fine art school, chose architecture and business instead. But I fill the space with a whole eclectic mix of Kandinsky nature-inspired, colorful paintings. And I hate frames, even though that is framed. But it's just, the sides are painted, it's just canvases, pure canvases, leaning against a wall, on top of a radiator, kind of, or occasionally stuck to the wall as well. And you fill the space with color and art and nature. You can't help but feel inspired. And so a lot of people love the fact that it's not a pristine, perfect place. It's actually it's very cozy and rough and actually very inviting. So it's different from your usual sterile board meeting, even if there are some hipster artwork or posters on the wall. And I think that's something that works really well. And then I think it's just the storytelling around the space. It's the House of Transformation, right? And everything around you can pick up, you can move it. You can make it a dance floor, you can make it an open space, you can do a long table dinner, you can break out upstairs. And we had a lot of fun with the interior design because we basically got 1,000 sheets of pre-cut ply that we then screwed into boxes, and then it's like maybe about 120 boxes that have been wing nutted together to form this house and these 2 staircases and the stage and the island and there's benches and the seating. And then we varnished everything, sometimes with just a nice Osmo white varnish and sometimes with a more dark brown. And it's just, make it look balanced and harmonious, and it's super fun to do it yourself, rather than you feel so much more connected to a place if your sweat and your hard work has gone into it, and it's something that then you care for so much more.
Totally. And maybe even just that's like step 2 or 3 of being invested is like with your sweat. That maybe step 1 or 2 is even just being able to interact in a space rather than just being a consumer or a visitor, right? Because like that notion of being a visitor in a space is kind of a degree of separation. And I think
and another thing to that is no staff, no receptionist. This is your key, this is your space, off you go. There isn't, and also that makes it so much more affordable, because if we have to pay a full-time person to sit at a desk while people were in the space, that's it. There's no business model. All of our margins are eaten up by staff, and it's a pretty boring job for the person who's just sitting there, and a lot of things can be done remotely, through a really good Notion page or through a phone call. And you need a couple of backups, like, extra chargers and extra batteries and stuff. But actually, you don't need to run these spaces with loads of staff and loads of people, because affordability is really critical.
Let's talk about that for a second, Anton, because you've been at that intersection of tech, sustainability, and real estate for over a decade, and it is a very community-oriented kind of play between Rebuild and Selgars and Enchanted and all of that. But at the same time, you and I have talked about this before. It's like when the business model is the foundation of it and it's solid, so much more can be born later on, right? Rather than just like everyone coming together and everyone's hoping and dreaming and wishing, and then 6 months later the energy's gone and there's no money, and then people
exactly.
scramble.
I think that House of Transformation, I would say it's useful for a community building, and we have done loads of dinners and events. But actually, I would say that events like Enchanted and a place like Selgars lends itself far more to community participation. I think with House of Transformation, it is more of a business, in the sense of, like, I saw an opportunity. And most of the time we just rent the space as a private hire. Especially now that I'm away, we're doing less and less kind of our own programming, and we're focusing more on Selgars. But I think that this is the thing, is that people bring their own content and their own ideas. And I think that there's you got to focus on your own strengths. And I think that events and community building takes so much energy. And I think that makes sense if it's related to building a wider village and a movement. I think with House of Transformation, in many ways, like the dinners that were started there have now evolved into what we're doing at Enchanted, and that's great. But first and foremost, it was really just about creating, proving a point that actually you can create something that is affordable for people, is really aspirational, and makes money. Because I'd been going from consulting project to consulting project, explaining to them this time-space model, how you can create these third spaces, and they can be really aspirational, they can deliver social impact, and they can feed your bottom line, and it can be fantastic as part of a neighborhood development and so forth. And then yes, and then nothing happened. And so I then got kind of a bit disillusioned and frustrated with the industry, and said, well, you know what? No one's ever going to agree with my ideas. No one's ever going to trust my ideas. They're only going to trust my actions. And so if I can show to them a space, if I can show to them the business model, then maybe at some point they'll listen. And in a funny way, when I did that, they said it was great, but they still did their own thing, which is a shame. But I think this can be a model that so many people can adopt and bring into their corner of the world. Whichever city you're in, there's going to be a vacant office space, especially now. And if you can find a space that has a bit of wow factor, a bit of edginess, then actually, rather than putting in loads and loads of walls and trying to rent out small studios, keep it open and try and use this kind of multifunctional approach where you list it on all the platforms, you create this arena that people can use. And I think, it works, because it's one of the things that's so hard to find in cities at an affordable price. And what's great is when it's not booked, it becomes your apartment, and then you effectively have an apartment in the city that makes you money rather than cost you money, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love a few things you just said there, and I definitely want to circle back to trust and like the process of trust. If it's clients trusting you with opinions and ideas, or if it's trusting community. But for now, I want to highlight something else first, and this is really for me like so exciting about this continued journey with Green Planet, Blue Planet is people like yourself, like all the other guests as well, that are maybe through inspiration on some level, maybe even through that frustration you just shared, that like, man, like these clients, they get my ideas, but they don't do it. And then because of that, there's this aha moment where it's like, well, then I got to do it. Right. And so the guests that we have on here are all people that are actually taking things forward and creating like a slightly new phenomena, right, in their own social field, in their own city, and then maybe beyond that. And so think back, man, like, I don't know, a decade ago, whenever, an Airbnb was a thing for the first time, or 15 years ago, it was not a thing. Like this idea, this notion that you could just put your apartment on for like a weekend short-term rental, it was kind of ludicrous to a lot of people. And then suddenly it became available, it became trustworthy, it became easier than other ways of renting. It revolutionized the hotel industry, because it suddenly is like, no, I can just Airbnb something much nicer in a much less kind of stuffy way. And so it's these micro shifts, I think, of seeing both the vacuum and the possibility, but then also just, I don't know, maybe not everyone would agree with that, but for me, Airbnb, when I first used it, was in a professional context. I was an event manager at the time for a big company, and I had the option to rent hotel rooms or Airbnbs. And so it felt more human to me to rent Airbnbs. It felt more connected. It felt less separate. So there's something really exciting there, no? Like that like reality changes so fast when people take action in this inspired way.
And it's these platforms, but also this psychology that actually space is accessible. on demand. And the fact is that Airbnb is not the only player in town. There are dozens upon dozens of platforms for non-residential on-demand bookings. Like there's Peerspace, there's HireSpace, there's Tag Venue, there's countless Headbox, dozens upon dozens, Venue Scanner, and that's starting to enter into the awareness of a lot of corporations, a lot of businesses, where they realize, wait a second, there's all these spaces now accessible to us. Let's just create a bit of a fund that will then book these spaces, so that then we don't need to lease them ourselves. And now the whole industry of kind of Airbnb workspace and event space is starting to really boom. And that's what lends itself very well to these models, because we don't have to do the marketing ourselves. We can leverage these platforms, we can leverage Google, we can be found. And that's so critical, because when you're taking on a lease, cash flow is the most difficult thing, because you're doing the renovations and then you're often sitting empty because it takes time. Obviously, pandemic was a bit frustrating because it's you know, and it didn't. First year was incredibly slow, and it took time to pick up. But now with Selgars, we were able to get online, we were able to get SEO, we were able to do regular newsletters, and we've had over 200 inquiries in 3 months. We've booked out our spring, summer, and autumn this year. We're going to be profitable in our first year, even with 80k of infrastructure investment, and so that's great, and that's because we were able to leverage these platforms and get on a mix of Airbnbs and different aggregators, and then also get really seen on Google, and I think that being super then responsive to bookings and converting, and then leveling up our infrastructure, we were able to do that. And I think that's so important to really understand how to get your venue seen and booked quickly, and how to do that with minimal staff, without having to hire a sales team and lots of managers and an estate team. You know, we're running a venue here in Devon that usually would need a team of 5 or 6, but you know, by just doing things in a lean, streamlined way, it's myself, a part-time caretaker gardener, Debbie, and my wife Morgan, that helps out a little bit part-time, and we were able to subcontract our local builders, subcontract our people that do drainage nearby, and really tap into the local knowledge and skills to do the things we needed without needing to employ a big team. And I think that then sets you up for success with these types of projects, because it's expenses can run really quickly, especially with rising energy bills and all these things. And you dream of creating a village and living in this beautiful spot in nature, but actually the costs are very real. And I think that by staying lean and also buying yourself time to really invite people, not to a really messy project where everything is kind of not figured out and stressful and confusing, but to say, you know, we've built a solid foundation here. You know, this place works. This place doesn't just kind of eat money or burn money. This is a solid place with a real foundation and beauty. Come, spend time, co-live with us, join some of our events, imagine your life here, and then at the right time we can then buy this place together and take it to the next level. And I think so often, you know, you don't have that MVP stage in a village project where you can really show what you can do. You can build trust also with the locals, and take your time to build community, and take your time to structure the deal.
Well, because it does simply take time, right? Like, I mean, you know, the dream is the village, or the dream is the community for many people, actually, right? It's this idea of like, how can I live in a more connected living space, right? Like the modern world is, you know,
having a foot in the city, having a foot in the countryside, and
but it takes time. It takes time to build relationship. I mean, this is true for all friendships, for all business partners, for all relationships, and so but bills, once you take ownership or once you take a lease or whatever it is, they come every month, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I've seen many projects fail because of that, and I've been, I've been in my own projects that have had that difficulty from the get go. When because of that, I learned, okay, the foundation in this current paradigm is finance, right? Like
yeah,
we could talk about the money of the future and regenerative money. I think this is
exactly.
also an interesting
Yeah,
kind of
it's very
intersection,
cool, fascinating topic for sure. Yeah,
right? Because it's maybe even a little early for it, and maybe it's more about like DAOs and the decentralized kind of way of how to co-govern something first, right? Like, because how are we going to ever get to a different style of currency? Because right now all cryptos are still backed through the US dollar and the federal
mm.
bank, and are basically
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
money gambling
yes, of course.
cohort or loop, right? Which nothing wrong with it, but that's what we're learning right now. And what we really want are these different ways of governing, so that we can move beyond that one person being at the pulpit, or that one person being
Mm.
the leader, and we have kind of like a decentralized autonomous way of doing it. But it's not as easy as we can make it
Yeah.
sound with words, right? It has
Uh,
dynamic
and then there's also the idea
nuances.
of it, and then there's the lived reality of that.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think that what's the idea of it is beautiful, but the lived reality is actually, if you've got the wrong people and the wrong structure and the wrong expectations, it's a mess. And then actually, it's the complete opposite of what you'd want. And so it's a balance between the reality and then the ideal. And I think that first and foremost, we're not trying to revolutionize economics here. We are trying to create a beautiful home that we can live in forever. And I think that's a really important truth whenever anyone's starting a village project, is know your criteria and know how you want to live. Outside of changing the world, or kind of reinventing everything and rebuilding everything and kind of starting a new civilization, like deep down, what is the ecology and what is the environment in which you can thrive, and what is your criteria? It's something that Stephen Brooks said on a rebuild talk that really landed with me. Criteria in terms of location, proximity to the city that you love, proximity to the people that you care about, and what country, what setting really plays to your strengths. And for me, I always needed to be close to London. London is my home. It's the city that I spent most of the time in. It's where I have most of my memories in life, and I need to be within a decent non-vehicle transport distance. So I need to be able to go on my bike and my train and walk and cycle and be between these two destinations. And then the other aspect was my skill sets lie in marketing, storytelling, project management, and sales, right? And so I don't want to be stuck for 10 years in rooms with planners and councils trying to get permission to build a couple of little tiny homes in the middle of nowhere that has zero infrastructure, and you have to drive 2 hours from the nearest station, right? That's not for me. So I needed to find a property that met the criteria that I had, and that actually needed the skill set that I could bring, and that we could hit the ground running fast. And because I also don't have millions in the bank where I can just finance the purchase upfront of a big estate and then finance the renovations and then off we go. So I needed to do it in a more entrepreneurial way, and then
which goes for most people, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
And I think that lease to buy approach is what, if you don't have millions in the bank because you exited a tech company, then that's kind of really the only way, because then it makes the whole aspect of buying with a mortgage and also financing the property so much easier when you've proven the cash flow and when you've really understood. And I think 1 year is not enough. I think at least 2 years. And if you can get an extension for 3 or even 5 years with an option, then that's so important, because you need time, and then that then gives you the confidence, that lease and the option to then make the investments that you need. But then you're not buying an estate. You're just doing that kind of barn renovation, buying that glamping, doing these things that will make it more marketable, will make it more livable. And then the other thing that I learned from actually a rebuild talk as well was Jess from Chateau de Fay in France, fantastic project. They took over a castle pre-pandemic and then turned it into this venue and village. And they do winter co-living. And then they switch to event season and then back to co-living and then event season. And so using the winter months to live in community is really, really, really valuable, because actually that's the perfect time to then get to know people that potentially will buy with you, that will build with you. And then you use the summer to make some good extra cash flow, and also to host kind of more cultural gatherings like Enchanted. That's my dog over there. I think he wants
we're hearing what's his name, Zuko.
Zuko, yeah, he's a mountain bunny.
Yeah.
I'll check on him later. But yeah, that balance between co-living and also the event seasons, and really understanding how to market to each of your verticals, the weddings, the corporate team building, and also the kind of the yoga retreats and the wellness. And what the reality is that your calendar is not equal, right? Is that different times of the calendar, from midweek to weekend, from half term to term time, from summer to autumn to spring to winter, your product is completely fundamentally different. Your buildings might be the same, but actually your customer is going to be different. And understanding that and then thinking that through and having the flexibility in your marketing, but also in your product positioning, so that you can actually find that perfect balance of what you want to do as a village, as a community, as a tribe, and also what people are prepared to pay for. And so thinking all that through is really important, so that you can find that balance, and from the financial resilience to also then the community building. And that's something that I've kind of learned along the way through my research, through my consulting projects, and it's been super fun to put it into practice these last few months. So,
yeah, I mean, you said something really, really powerful there, that like the winter months, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, but the winter months are where you basically figure out your project. Like you really, that's like the core of the business, because the summer months are going to be amazing no matter where you are, right? There's going to be so much opportunity, and it's easy to live for the summer and then be like, the winter is just so hard.
Winter,
but really, that's the time.
That's the time, that's the time that you sink or swim, right? You don't have time later on. And really being strategic, focused, making the right investment there. And co-living makes it easier, because actually co-living is very easy to manage. People are living for long term. They're kind of helping out. It's really low maintenance, whereas events and weddings is high maintenance and requires a different energy and a different logistics. So actually, it marries up well to doing site infrastructure, but also to doing sales, and also the joy of sharing meals every single night. Like from 29th of Jan till like mid-March, there wasn't a single meal which I didn't have as a communal meal, as a dinner, right? Obviously lunch and breakfast we did separately, but like that's amazing. I only had to
That's
cook.
family style, right? Come together once a day. Yeah.
And there were times when I just cooked 2 times a week. Sometimes I only cooked once a week. And then I got beautiful food, far diverse than I ever would cook for myself. And it was literally on my doorstep. And so, okay, co-living won't generate as much revenue as the weddings and the corporate retreats and stuff, but there's a lot of other value it creates. And also in the winter, you're not going to get those big bookings anyway. So actually, that is the best use case for that particular period of time. And so I think it's just navigating the switch between different types of activation of the space is really important. But then actually longer term is, by having this multifunctional model, the co-living is kind of a test of what your village could be like. And then eventually what we want to do is actually in the Northern Woodland create a self-build co-housing where we can build our own bungalows and tiny homes and actually have a permanent community live here all year round. And that's a process that, of course, will take many years. But the great thing is that we can be here, we can pilot, we can test, and eventually, once we've bought it, maybe we don't need to do any more weddings apart from the weddings we really like, and maybe actually the barn just becomes a big co-working space. Who knows? But the beautiful thing is you have then this resilience that comes through having options. Is that you're not facing a cash flow crisis that where you don't know if you're going to run out of money next week. You're on a stable footing, and then you can take your time and really get to know people, and not just what they say, but also how they behave and how they live and how they act. And I think that's super, super important, because lots of people fall in love with the idea of living in a village with the land and community, but actually it's incredibly hard to set up, and also
it's evolutionary, right? Like it's evolutionary in a personal level and on a collective level, as well as on an economic level. So it's like juggling these different kind of elements that are all in movement, and none of them have been figured out in a way that they work everywhere, right? Because it's real, right? I want to ask a question there and come back to the topic of trust, and just like not about your clients this time, but about you personally, Anton. Like, how do you experience trust? Like, what is required for you to trust people, ideas in a process? Like, do you have an awareness of that? What's happening in your inside, where you're like, oh no, thank you, or like, oh yeah, this is a good thing?
Well, I think the first thing is I genuinely do trust myself. Like, I genuinely trust that I have the skills, the experience. I'm at the time of life where I can execute on this, and so I trust my intuition, I trust my judgment, I trust my research, and I think that's and as a result, I feel confident to make fast, quick decisions in this first phase. And the way I like to think about it is, we're in a startup phase. We're not in a community phase. We're in a startup phase that will then enable us to build a community later. So this first 6 months is very much about being very pragmatic, being focused on infrastructure, keeping the team small, not over-promising, and actually making decisive, clear decisions, working super hard, but really loving it, and not promising people that, you're going to have shares in this, come. No. Like, I'm self-financing this. I have full ownership. We're going to get to a point where we're profitable in our first year. We've run some amazing events. We've created a strong home, and then we shall look at how we invite more people into this next phase. And so I always like to think about, if you want to create the square, which is your kind of ultimate village, or a V, or a triangle, it could be another way. But you need to have this kind of lean startup approach. Then you bring the circle and the community, and then together the triangle, which is the lean startup, more conventional way of doing things, together with then the more sociocratic, collective, consensus-based dialogue and decision-making. Those together then create the structure that can hold the square, which is the village. And so being able to dance between these two ways of communicating within a group is tough. And the mindset and the behavior of lean startup and triangle is in direct opposition to the mindset and behavior of being in a community and being listening first, and the one is relationship focused and one is results focused. And it's often very difficult to hold both. And that's, I think, the mastery, is to be able to juggle and jump between and sense when too much attention is being given to results and not enough is being given to relationship. And how we harmonize between the two is critical to building a village over time. But often it's not as simple as we always need to keep them in balance. There are times in the process where actually there needs to be a complete imbalance. It needs to be all startup and very little relationship. and there are other times when it needs to be all relationship and very little startup. And it depends. And every time you invite more people, you add complexity. You think, oh, it's fantastic, more people. Yeah, it's great. But actually, if you haven't got the strong foundation, and if you're not clear on what it is, and if the invitation hasn't been correct, if expectations are not aligned, then actually more people creates more complexity, and boom. And so I'm sensitive to all of that, and therefore I'm taking my time to really bring community in, and I'm kind of thinking about Enchanted, which is the big event, as a vehicle to start that journey. Lots of people are coming to kind of co-live and do little projects, and we're building these great relationships with other couples and friends on a one-to-one or in small groups, and we're kind of working on this big cultural event together, and hopefully that will then create the energy and momentum to begin this new story of how, it shifts from just being a venue that I've taken over and I'm running into this enchanted village that we're starting to imagine together. I don't know what will emerge from that, but there's a really wonderful group of speakers and performers and artists that are involved, and I think it has a potential to really be something very special, and to lead into the evolution of what we do here, and hopefully run every year. And it's so fun to not just have a venue for a week, but to have a venue for 2 years, if not forever, that we can keep building on. All these little touches, all these little decorations. We built a 3-meter high giraffe in the barn called Cami, a phoenix out of recycled bamboo. Because a giraffe used to be called camel leopard in the ancient times, so Cami for short. And then we have curiosity cabinet, and from the co-living days, and I'm building a portal, a big circular portal, 2 meters high, as I was explaining, out of waste wood. And there's all these fun little moments that we can create on the land that capture people's imagination, and I think that's just going to continue to evolve and make the place more beautiful and more enchanted. And so this relationship between a kind of creative cultural event and a venue is, I think, really powerful. So, Chateau de Fay have their arts festival, and then there's lots of, and then Wasing Estate has Medicine Festival, and Wazinga. I think these types of gatherings that bring music, art, storytelling, workshops, knowledge sharing together with a venue is a really wonderful combination. And so, we're at the beginning of that, which is exciting.
And it's an invite for everyone listening who happens to be in the UK, right? July 6 to 9.
Yeah, exactly. Or if they're outside of the UK, they're welcome as well. And so, we'll be at Selgars in Devon, and it'll be at the start of July. 4 wonderful days from Thursday to Sunday. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I'm super excited for everything that you've been involved in the last years, and you having your own kind of estate and 8 acres, at that kind of enter at that stage is let's just see what happens next. But I think Enchanted is going to be success that's already visible, and it's very, very inspiring, Anton, to hear that entrepreneurial success is the foundation, because having been in this space for many years myself, I owned and ran a studio space a decade ago at this point, here in Victoria on Vancouver Island, and I remember how messy it was at times, and how it always came back down to everyone wanted more relationship and relational based interactions, but if the money wasn't flowing, then it was like shut door, right? And so having the entrepreneurial foundation, and having entrepreneurs with that kind of balance of right brain, left brain, or masculine, feminine, whatever you want to call it, that then opens the door to what you said. Like, it's the triangle and the circle and the square. Harry Potter fans would call it the Deathly Hallows, but it's like the sacred geometry that actually takes us to another level of how we can interact, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that you don't talk about it so much in in kind of conferences or podcasts, you talk more about like the vision and the purpose, but the ruthless automation and optimization of your schedule, of your day-to-day tasks, and being able to get shit done. There's no space for management. There's no space for lots of meetings. You just got to get stuff done, and if efficient, productive meetings, then people have their areas of responsibility related to their strengths and expertise, and then you just go. I don't have time to sit around training people up and kind of discussing loads of things. We have a goal, we have a venue, and we need to go for it. And I have loads and loads of kind of communications, document creation, website management, as well as and what I found is actually that I'm able to push my limits even further than ever before, because I have this balance of physical challenges as well as digital challenges. So I've always optimized my computer work really, really well. Like buy a big screen iMac, sit up straight, make sure the posture is correct, make sure that you have an environment where you can focus for hours and hours and hours at a time, and you can get the work done online that you need. Don't be hunched on a laptop. Don't invest in your performance. But then being able to balance that out with like shoveling and carrying loads of stuff and managing a build site and so much activity that's actually involves, and we call it the green gym, which is just
the green gym.
Yeah, which is going out and doing useful stuff outside and getting fit while you're doing it, and that balance means that you kind of finish with a big warm shower, bath at the end of the day, and then you sleep like a baby, and then you're up with the sunlight the next day, and off you go again. And I think that yes, you can always hire more people, but I also challenge you can also optimize yourself. You can optimize your processes, and I think there's a tendency to just add more people. Oh yeah, people will help. Add more layers of management, hire more people, more job ads. Now you're a recruiter, and all of that just ends up creating more cost, more expense. And it's amazing how much you can do if you are focused and if you prioritize correctly. And actually, there's so many people locally that have the skills that you can hire on demand. So I think that's something that it's so important to work on that side of your own performance and work ethic, right? You really have to push yourself. Like this isn't just a case of I'm a village holder. Sorry, I'm a vision holder, right? I imagine what this place could be, and I enable others. The reality is you got to go and you got to shovel the shit, and you got to carry the wheelbarrows, and you got to work harder than everyone else, and that sets an example. And that's how you build the foundation of a project like this. And then, of course, you can celebrate later in time as the project evolves and it's on a stable foundation. Then, of course, yeah, it's great to sit in a circle, but then you realize that actually you earned the right to have that because you really did everything you could to make sure the foundation was strong. And so that's the kind of place I'm in right now. And actually, it's very, very beautiful because there's a lot of clarity. Like and it's really wonderful to have that trust in oneself, even if there is tension or friction or problems or things don't go always perfectly. That you come back to then that trust and conviction that this is where you want to be and need to be, and it's a dream to be able to have the opportunity to take on a project like this, and it is making me healthier and happier in the process, which is
nice, Anton. This is great to hear. I think the big circle that we've been making here in this episode from the beginning to this moment is really about when we reimagine spaces. You just made the metaphor, the comparison of like digital work and in-person green gym work, right? it is a place-based kind of work, right? So there's a
Yeah,
tie-in to a local
exactly.
destination, like a place of earth, right? A
Yeah.
root in the ground, or however we see that picture. But I think that's where purpose and meaning unfold in a way different kind of capacity, and that's where things are also much more real than just like, I don't know, another NFT Web3 kind of play. Now that might be part of it, but if it's not connected to Mother Earth and to our well-being through the soil into the ground, through the
Yeah.
microbiome into our gut biome, then it isn't really connected to anything. And so it's really
Yeah.
interesting to see that that's often like the red thread here
Yeah.
in these
The,
conversations.
the big thing that we're missing, and I've also seen that I've been missing, is the ability to have a very tangible impact on your physical surroundings. Like whether it's growing your own food, whether it's like painting a wall, whether it's fixing something, whether it's like carrying something or digging something, to like actually in a very real way influence your environment. Because so often we don't get that opportunity. You know, we can access, we go into the coffee shop, we can't touch anything or move anything. We in our apartments often we rent it, so we can't even put anything on the walls. We can't put anything, and so we have, and then we live our lives on the screens, and so we're very disembodied. And then, and actually, our lives we have so little freedom or agency over our actual environment, that we just kind of actually shut off this desire within us to be able to build and play and shake things up. And then there's the joy I had of like using a circular saw for the first time, and then like making tables out of like waste beds and things, and and figuring things out on my own, like not having to call an expert. It's like I can figure out how to fix this tap. I can sort this out. I can, and then actually the empowerment that that brings, and then because yes, time in nature is beautiful, but I think actually the most transformative thing was just that feeling that I can build something. I can put this giraffe in the world, right? Like, and here it is, and that actually that that an idea can be manifested, and also that joy of just sweating outside for hours and hours, sometimes in the rain, sometimes not, and then seeing that your environment is now a bit better every single day.
Yeah,
Whether
you
we've
talked
painted
about
a
hard
wall,
work,
whether
right?
we've rearranged the furniture, whether we've, organized, put paving in. I mean, I think I've shoveled and kind of put maybe over 12 tons of rock paving rocks to create a lovely path around the barn and into the glamping and so forth, and countless bricks and all sorts, and then yeah, it's like there's so many puzzles to solve, and so many ways to use your creativity in the out of the screen as well as on the screen. And what I've enjoyed is actually it's the same thinking that I have on hacking websites, or marketing or business modeling, or how I optimize what I do on the screen. I can do the same when I design things or build things or make things. And of course, yeah, I'm not going to build an entire structure, but there's so much I can do. Figuring out how to make concrete actually moppable, because we had a kind of nice polished concrete floor, and then we danced on it, and then it was so muddy, and then I realized, oh shit, I can't wash this. So then Googling around, and someone said, oh, have you tried concrete sealer? What the hell is concrete sealer? And then a few weeks later, we have a wonderful floor that's moppable. Happy days. And then and this is one story of like
Yeah.
hundreds, and that fills me with so much joy. And
Yeah.
also the people that come here, I think that the takeaway is around the sharing of the meals, but it's the active participation in a place that makes you feel much more alive and connected to it. And that's why a lot of these retreat centers that, oh, no, we just sit and we meditate. No, let's build stuff, shake stuff up, try stuff out, build a bonfire, interact with the environment in a more tactile way. And so, yeah, and I think it's also these practices of growing your own food and building your own home and creating art together is so central to how we feel more alive. And so yeah, that's what I've kind of learned from this, and also what I've experienced in terms of my own personal joy of being here. Just managing other people to do the work would be so horrible. I want to do it. I want to get stuck in. I don't want someone else to do it. Obviously there's some things that do need to be delegated, like mowing the lawn and doing but like actually so much, I built a shower. I just assembled it and then I built it again, and I managed to figure out how all the parts work and use recycled wood, and happy days. We have a hot shower. And so I think these observations shouldn't be ignored, of like why has that made me so happy?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's plenty of better showers out there than the one I built, right? But this is the first one that I built myself, and that's and how do you put a value on that? And there's some very, very strong meaning attached to these types of experiences, and this is what you can't do in the city. So you can only do on the farm or on the estate.
And that's also where, what you mentioned earlier, like hard work then suddenly meets joy. And so it's unmistakably kind of, a form of alignment. And, I invite everyone who's tuned into this episode to check out your projects, the community work that you do. If it's Rebuild, House of Transformation, Selgars Estate, Enchanted, coming up July 6 to 9, I believe, right? Thank you so much, Anton, for being on Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, for taking the time, for taking us into your universe, for sharing your joy for building things in the real world as well as digitally, and the inspiration to do things well from an entrepreneurial foundation, because that's what actually allows for a longer impact, and for maybe later on, but allows for many more people to onboard in a way that is sustainable for the circle of people that is creating.
Amazing. Thank you. Great summary. And I look forward to hosting you here one day when you travel to this part of the world.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've actually not really spent a lot of time in the UK, so at some point I'll have to be there.
Yeah, for sure.